It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. There was a lot of talk early on about how many of you have been to a farm lately, and I'd love to have done this in our farm. Whatever you expect to see, it would blow your mind. So I'd like to start with a very quick 60-second video to give you a look inside. In the last 10 years, vertical farming has boomed. In fact, all of controlled environment has boomed quite a bit. In 2014, there was less than $100 million invested in total in all of CA in US. 6 companies were in play. By 2021, 7 years later, there was over $6 billion invested in US alone. Over $10 billion globally. I've seen numbers high as $14 billion. And over 60 companies in US alone, again, a couple hundred globally. The question is, why? Why was CEA so popular, so necessary, and why did it explode this much? Well, the answer is quite obvious. Agriculture as a system, we've heard this many times before today by most of the speakers, and we can agree on this. Agriculture as a system is under tremendous, tremendous pressure. If we look at climate pressure, you have floods, you have droughts from California to Australia. We're losing topsoils, massive, massive issue that every farmer talks about. When you take a look at growing cities, we're urbanizing as a society. More than 64% of our people are living in cities, going to 73%. Yet farms and food production is moving further and further away. On average in the US, food travels 2,400 miles to get from farm to table. Here in UK, post-Brexit, 4,600 kilometers on average. While we're urbanizing, the consumers are really starting to expect a much higher standard. They want clean, they want sustainable, they want food that is locally grown, that reconnects them to their supply chain. And they don't want just calories anymore. I know the Global South is a bit different. We will get to the Global South in a minute, but speaking to not the North, but halfway towards the Global South here, we want more than calories, we want nutrition. Everywhere we want nutrition. And technology enables us to do this. Technology shines a light on, first of all, with all the visibility, what our food production systems are. And secondarily, with AI, robotics, big data, all of these things, we can produce food completely different. Agriculture needs to adapt. Let's take a quick look at the supply chain. The supply chain, traditional supply chain here is actually quite efficient from a cost perspective. But it is not resilient. And the example I want to give you guys, and I know it's an extreme example, but I want to talk about COVID for a second because it's just so clear what happened. You had all the restaurants temporarily shut down. You had all the retail chains essentially be out of stock in everything. Store shelves were being emptied faster than they could be replenished. And yet you had food rotting at the farms. How could that be? Well, what happened is the retail supply chain was so overtaxed while the food service supply chain was sitting there idle, and it's the same trucks going to the same distribution centers in the same cities, but we couldn't pivot. That's what I mean by inflexible. I can give you a lot more examples. What CEA, Control Environment Agriculture, and vertical farming in particular, offered is to eliminate that really non-value added part of the food chain, but to compress it all into a farm, to compress the farm, the processing facility, the refrigeration, and transportation, put your farm literally at the distribution center of your customer. The goal is to use a highly efficient last mile that has been developed and disintermediate the 2,400 miles to get the produce there. And that way the farmer makes a little more money, the consumer gets much higher quality product, and the retailer can make money. So what happened? Why did this fail? Well, first of all, I do want to reframe the narrative a little bit. Traditional farming has literally had millennia to figure out how to grow farm crops in different environments, drive yields, and improve. Greenhouses have had a century. Vertical farming has had a decade. And I believe that vertical farming has accomplished a lot in that decade. There's been tremendous accomplishments. The issue is, though, many have failed, and I do want to very honestly and introspectively talk about why that has occurred. I believe that we believe that two things were the main issues. First of all, fundraising outpaced fundamentals. And second, and this is the introspective part, most business models were flawed. Let's start with the fundraising part. The technology just wasn't ready. If you think about vertical farming CA as a whole, again, greenhouse have had a century here, but you're growing crops. You can see a picture there of literally a rack in early 2014 with some lights and some fans. You grow the crops, you see how they grow, you see what's not working. You have to figure out how to get to the smart farming that is automated, that's an industrial automation project, that is advanced manufacturing, that grows food consistently with highest quality at the right unit economics. Well, crops have a cycle to grow. We grow in 20 days, where outdoors you can grow in 90 to 110 days, but still, it takes time to cycle. So when you see what's not working, you have to try to improve it, figure it out, design it, then codify that design and go through new and new cycles. 10 years is a very short period of time to go from the picture in the left to the picture of the smart farm on the right. Most early pioneers were tech bros, and I mean no disrespect to tech bros. They were software guys that came in and wanted to change the world, and they had a phenomenal idea. But the problem is that the business models that came up were software business models. And if you think about a typical software business model, software is a very cheap distribution cost once the product works and is functioning. So the goal with any software model is you spend ahead of revenue. You spend ahead of revenue, you build the product, you put the product out there. It's all about land grab. It's all about building before you have it. Vaporware, the concept of vaporware. Silicon Valley is infamous for it. The problem is you apply those concepts to advanced manufacturing, and you're going to get exactly what we got. The second problem was that there was this maniacal focus from venture capitalists and funding guys that came in to fund this, that you had to beat traditional agriculture on price on day one. And I'm sorry to say this is my American coming out, it's moronic. It's beyond reasonable to expect that just because you have cool tech, you can outprice a system whose fixed costs have largely been covered already and who's operating on variable costs. It's just a bad plan, and fools should be parted with their money. Finally, there's not been a focus on the consumer. We were all so fascinated about our tech. We kept talking about tech. But the point is, you got to create value for the consumer. The consumer has to get something that is greater, and that's what's been forgotten. If you think about, again, folks in vertical farming, there's two curves here, and I love this. Vertical farming not only had to overcome the trough of disillusionment, the adoption of the technology curve. I talked about the technology from sensors, lights, software, hardware, based all on crop science, and using big data and learning and cycling through all this. Gardner has done a phenomenal job detailing how technology is adopted for most new technologies. You take a look at this from AI to go back 10 years in new technology, and they have discovered the curve is pretty similar. What happens is you get super excited about the tech, and everybody starts writing up about it, and the hype is building, 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 until you reach a pinnacle where the product finally has to perform. And the problem is, usually, the products in most tech do not perform on day one. And that's when the funding dries up, and the companies that don't have a great plan start plummeting, and you go in between the two dotted lines there through what's called the trough of disillusionment. And anybody who survives that trough rebuilds the industry and builds great companies. The problem is vertical farming didn't only have to overcome the technology curve, but they had to actually build customer trust and build superior products. The chart above demonstrates Jeffrey Moore's chasm or crossing the chasm model, which is much more of a typical bell curve. And the way that brands are built historically is, again, you have your early innovators that love the tech process, they love sustainability, they love all these things that we were promising early on. And about 1.3% of the consumer in this case, and they will go ahead and support the product and jump all over it. You might even get to the early innovators, but at some point you have to get to the majority. You have to get to the mass market or your product will never work. And Jeffrey Moore called it the chasm. You have to cross the chasm. The irony is, and I created this chart in 2020 when I spoke to the industry, giving them a heads up about if we don't do something different, the crash is coming, and the crash has come, and for all practical purposes, we're the only vertical farming company left in the world because we heeded some of this advice and many other reasons, but the chasm overlays the trough disillusionment perfectly. We literally had to fly the plane while we're building it. And what happened? What happened is we added a third chart here. Take a look in 2025, 2026. Everybody flushed out. But that's okay. This is development of industry. This is how industries build and mature. This is not a problem. So how did those who overcame this trough disillusionment do so? It's actually quite interesting. We call it the learning loops. And this is something that I think, regardless of how all of you guys feel about vertical farming or control environment agriculture, we can all agree on the following. Farming is really, really hard. It's really hard. Let's say you're a 12 or 13-year-old farmer anywhere in the world. You start out, you're farming till you're 60, 65, until you pass on the baton. You get 40 to 50 cycles in a lifetime to see your crop. You develop a gut. You're the hardest working person. You hardly get paid for your work. You even develop some wisdom about your crops, but your cycles are so far apart and there's so many variables that you really don't learn the way humanity learns. You're not developing knowledge. There's no scientific method. You're just experimenting and trying and reacting and adapting. I'll give you an example why, because this is a controversial statement. You take the best farmer here from UK and you go stick him in Africa or stick him in China or stick him in US. And can you expect them to have a good crop in the first year, second year, third year? Unlikely. They're going to have to figure out how to adapt all their wisdom to this new crop, new soils, new environmental conditions. How do we grow it? Next example, you take that same great farmer. Can you guarantee they'll have a good year here in UK next year or the following year? Absolutely not. Too many variables. They don't control anything. Everything's an act of God or nature. Nothing is controlled. Greenhouses are much better. You enclose a lot more of the environment. It is cleaner. It is better. You go through more cycles. You grow faster. You might be, that same grower might have 150 to 200 cycles in a lifetime of crops. Our first commercial farm from 5 years ago was a 10 by 10 by 10 cube. A cube inside a building. Total precision control. Smart farm. Modularized, standardized, industrialized. Built to run 50 years without a lot of maintenance or everything else. That farm has essentially 100 lanes, 100 fields. Each one can have different environment. 100 fields, 25 cycles a year. Our average 23 or 24-year-old farmer has 2,000 to 2,500 times to see the crop in a year. We're literally learning decades, if not centuries, every month. And this is where AI comes in. This is where big data comes in. This is where, if you limit the number of variables, it becomes so important. What's really important is, it's not only for the vertical farms, but once we learn this data and build these digital twins and crop models, you can take it to greenhouses and outdoor agriculture. This is how you help farmers long term. How do we overcome the chasm? Well, you have to build a brand. One of my premises, and it's a hard thing to say because it's not a farmer's fault, but there are no brands in produce. There are labels. A brand has to promise something. There has to be a commitment to the customer. Is it fresher? Is it going to last longer? Is it more nutrient dense? What is it? What happens today? You get the product, a processor sticks a label on it and goes in the store. It's a label. There's no consumer promise. It's a true commodity. We have to decommoditize the produce industry, and the only way to decommoditize a produce industry is through superior products. We want to drive consumption. My premise is, again, outside of the global south, which I don't want to be cavalier about it, but nobody will eat more vegetables because it's 10 cents less. And we need governments, we need retailers, we need smart farmers, we need everybody working this together because we have to differentiate produce. We have to pay the farmer for superior product, and the consumer will pay for it. But this is the way to differentiate it. So with that, what does that mean? I want to be very practical. In US, North America, in the next month, we're introducing super veggies. Super nutrient dense, completely naturally produced products that will change the whole produce category. We're going to create a new subcategory in produce, and we don't have to charge much more for this. Because in a smartly designed farm, it doesn't cost me any more to do this. We stress the plants to drive secondary metabolites. This is basic crop science with technology. This is how we begin differentiating produce. Bottom line, we really believe that it is time to truly rethink agriculture as a system, not as a point. It's not a farmer thing, a retailer thing, or every silo in that supply chain. We have to apply system thinking and rethink it. Everything I've been talking about is done today with the right unit economics. It exists. None of it is science fiction. The future is now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. And are there any questions in the room for Mike? Yes.
Hi, I'm Abby. I'm a food security student at the University of Edinburgh. And my question is, do you see this controlled environment farming as something that traditional farmers are keen to move into, or do you see it as something that is going to open doors for people who don't have agricultural backgrounds to get into the field?
Thanks, Abby. I think both. I think, first of all, you don't need the same land. You don't need the same fixed costs. You need different fixed costs. But I think there's so many things. We're not ever working against the farmer. We're always working with the farmers. We can grow young plants. We can propagate plants for farmers. We can do so many things that a farmer cannot do today to increase their harvests and to work with them. I think it helps traditional farmers, and I think it enables tremendous innovation in the industry. We don't think, by the way, that all produce production will shift to vertical farming or CA. We think it's one arrow in your quiver of a clean, sustainable food system. We think it's silly that all of these food systems have been built and supply chains have been built to support centralized distribution models. Everything in the U.S., 95% of produce in the U.S. comes out of Salinas, California, for 9 months out of the year, and it moves to Yuma, Arizona for 3 months. And everything is built around it. All the inefficiencies and everything is built around it. There's no need to take a highly perishable item and have it travel everywhere. I have a different solution for potatoes and for apples and for carrots. So the point is, there's not a one-fits-all strategy, but I think we are working with the farmers so farmers can improve their profitability. And at the same time, we are so focused on delivering nutrition all over the world without, frankly, gouging anybody. But we will not talk about discounting on price because we think it's the wrong conversation.
Thank you so much, Mike.